In the darkness of seemingly simple decisions, there are unseen things lurking, waiting to turn a peaceful life into a nightmare. As you enter the world of online transactions, where values and trust are tested, remember that not all that glitters is gold. Eerie figures can hide behind every advertisement, whispers from the hidden corners of the soul, and inexplicable entities are waiting to pull you into their cold embrace. Be careful, because each choice can lead you to horrors you cannot imagine. Story 1. The haunting begins. When I was 22 and had just moved into a new apartment, I decided to find a couch on Craigslist to complete my living space. A month ago, while shopping around for options, I came across a bench model that looked like a bargain from the promotional photos. The couch looks brand new, with soft upholstery and a luxurious design. However, the price is so low that I feel doubtful. The seller requested email communication with a somewhat strange address, mexicampapi666@hotmail.com. This name made me feel uneasy, but greed and the hope of owning a good cheap item prompted me to send an email asking for more information. Within 5 minutes, I received a response from the seller. He accepted my offer and asked for an address for delivery. The restlessness in my heart grew, but I continued because I didn't want to miss the opportunity. However, my unusual feelings made me uncomfortable with letting a stranger come to my house. I offered to go to his house to receive the goods. Still, he insisted that he wanted to come to my house. This insistence made me feel threatened, and I decided to stop responding to emails, hoping he would give up. A day later, he emailed again, providing his address. My anxiety was rising, but since the address wasn't too far and the bench seemed like a good opportunity, I decided to drive there, despite my fears. When I arrived in the neighborhood, I immediately felt the difference. The house I stood in front of was smaller than the other houses around, and the atmosphere here seemed gloomy and cold. I rang the bell and a middle-aged man wearing a baseball cap opened the door. His smile seemed unable to hide its coldness, and his attitude was a bit too welcoming. He invited me in, and I couldn't refuse. Entering the living room, I immediately saw the couch, but surprise and disappointment struck when I noticed that the chair was not the same as in the photo. It was scratched and torn, completely different from the perfect image I had seen. I expressed my disappointment and he just smiled slightly, not feeling embarrassed at all, and offered to reduce the price. I declined, saying I was no longer interested. As I tried to find my way out, the man put his hand on my shoulder in a creepy way and offered me the couch for free if I agreed to pay by doing something for him. A feeling of horror took over me, and I quickly refused. I hurried back to the car, not daring to look around, just wanting to get out of there as quickly as possible. That night, as I lay in bed and watched TV, a sudden feeling of insecurity came over me. I heard strange noises from the porch, crunching footsteps and turning doorknobs. Turning off the TV sound, I strained my ears to listen and felt my heart beating as fast as a drum. I jumped out of bed, went to the front door and looked through the peephole, but didn't see anything. The feeling of suspense never stopped. I continued to hear the sound of the backyard gate opening and closing continuously. At this point, I grabbed the phone, my hands shaking as I dialed 911. Breathlessly announcing that someone was trying to break into my apartment. I yelled over the phone, trying to stay calm as I heard the doorknob at the back of the apartment turn. I felt the presence of something, a ghost lurking just behind the door. I can only pray and wait. When the police arrived, they checked the entire area but found no trace of anyone. The air in the apartment was still heavy, and the silence almost engulfed me. A month has passed since that terrible night, but I still cannot sleep well. The strange noises and the feeling of being watched still haunt me. I was certain that it was the man selling the couch who followed me home, and what I experienced couldn't have been just a coincidence. I have decided to never use Craigslist again and am currently looking for a new apartment, hoping to escape the ghosts of my past and find peace in my life. Story 2: The Spiral of Nightmares. When my son was about to turn 18, I decided to buy him a car as a birthday gift. I started looking on all the major auto websites like cars.com, eBay Motors, and a bunch of other platforms. But the prices on these sites are beyond my budget. After a week of searching everywhere, Craigslist emerged as the last light of hope. I started scrolling through the various classified ads, hoping to find a real bargain. Finally, a listing on Craigslist caught my eye: a 2003 Toyota Camry with just 67,000 miles, no accidents, no damage, and for sale for just $3,500. This price seems too good for such a reliable car. The seller lives about 10 miles from me, a reasonable distance for a vehicle inspection. When I called to make an appointment, the man introduced himself as Bob. His voice sounded normal and confident, assuring him that there was absolutely nothing wrong with the car. I brought $3,500 in cash, although I planned to negotiate the price. I arrived 15 minutes early than the appointment. Nervousness and anxiety began to creep into my mind. Bob's house is located in a small, quiet neighborhood and seems a bit far away from the surrounding houses. The house's garage was open, but there was no Camry inside. Instead, I saw a pile of old auto parts and just a shabby old pickup truck standing in the area. When I got to the front door, I checked the house number and knocked. 5 minutes had passed, and I decided to call Bob. The cell phone rang from inside the house, but no one answered. I felt confused and suspicious, but thought maybe he was just busy. My suspicions grew. I decided to peek through the windows to see who was inside. Through the frosted glass, I couldn't see everything clearly, but I saw something quite classic, seemingly a dining room. Across from the dining room, I saw a figure standing at the back door, looking out. I thought it must be Bob, but when I knocked on the window, he didn't move. There are no gates or paths leading to the backyard, just a large yard. I don't understand why he didn't hear me. The feeling of anxiety and nervousness increased when I decided to walk around the house to the backyard. When I reached the back door, a terrifying sight met my eyes. The figure standing there is not Bob. It was a strange silhouette, blurry and distorted. It did not appear to be a normal human being. Its limbs were unusually long, its shape was uneven, and its face was unrecognizable. The shadow stood still, not moving, like a living statue of fear. I felt a cold wave run down my spine. Nervousness and fear overtook me, and I rushed out of the backyard, back the way I came, as if an invisible force was chasing me. I walked back to my car, glancing up one last time toward the house. The window curtain I had been looking in had been drawn back, but I could still see two other curtains open. An unrecognizable, haunting inner gaze was watching me, as if sending a terrifying message. The sincerity of my fear made me slam the accelerator to the floor, racing home as fast as I could. The unreal and haunting feeling about the house, the strange silhouettes, and the mysterious eyes still cling to my mind. When I got home, I couldn't sleep, my mind tormented by gruesome images and unanswered questions about what I had witnessed. Neither the Toyota Camry nor the seller was there. It's all just a terrible scam, a trap to lure people like me. I couldn't help but think that whoever that man was, he had no intention of selling me anything. I returned with a haunting feeling, fearing that I had become an immobile statue pushed into a terrifying nightmare from which I could not escape. Story 3: A Terrifying Encounter. A year ago, when I decided to buy an iPhone 5 for myself, I didn't expect that a simple decision would lead to a terrifying nightmare. Searching Craigslist, I spotted an intriguing ad: an iPhone 5 for sale for $200. The seller claims that the phone is in good condition and only wants to upgrade to an iPhone 5C. I didn't know much about how to test a phone to make sure it was working properly, so I asked my younger brother to come along, who had more experience with this. We arranged to meet the seller in the parking lot of a Dunkin' Donuts store around 10 p.m. It was a quiet evening, and the atmosphere seemed unusual from the start. Two men, large and intimidating, stepped out of a black Honda Civic. Facing them, I felt a slight nervousness, but thought that perhaps this was how many phone dealers appeared unfriendly. One of the men showed me the phone. There were no scratches, and my brother took my SIM card and inserted it into the new phone to check. After confirming that the phone worked properly, he suddenly asked for $250 instead of $200 as initially reported. I felt a wave of uneasiness, but decided not to show my anxiety. I only brought $200 with me, although I actually had enough money to pay more. I didn't want to spend more than the original asking price. It seems like this is part of his game. I gave the man $200, and after receiving the money, he and his friend returned to the Honda Civic. As we headed back to our car, my brother commented that those two hadn't left the parking lot yet. I wasn't too worried and started the car, but as soon as we pulled away, my brother announced that the Honda Civic was starting to move behind us. I felt a cold sting spread through my body. We pulled out of the parking lot, but immediately noticed that the Honda Civic was still close behind us. Every time I turned, that car skillfully changed direction to follow us, like a predator tracking its prey. My brother advised me to pull over to deal with the situation, but I felt that would only make us more vulnerable. I realized that these people were probably looking for trouble and decided to drive at high speed to create distance. I started driving dangerously with the intention of distracting them. In a panic, I tried to make sudden turns, but no matter what, the Honda Civic still followed. When we came to an intersection with a red light, I didn't hesitate and rushed through the intersection before other cars started moving. My younger brother screamed at me, calling me stupid and crazy, but I succeeded in creating a little distance. Finally, we arrived home, but the feeling of tension still did not leave me. My heart beat fast with fear, and I felt like I had just escaped a dangerous encounter. After returning home, I was happy to get a working phone at a cheap price, but that joy didn't last long. While I was playing with my phone, my parents and younger brother went to sleep. Suddenly, the sound of two car doors slamming outside interrupted the silence of the house. I looked out the window and felt like my heart had stopped beating. The black Honda Civic was parked across the street, almost right in front of our house. I realized that those two people might have come close to the door. My legs were shaking as I woke up my dad and told him everything as quickly as I could. He stood up, grabbed a baseball bat, and crouched near the front door. There was a knock on the door, and one of the guys outside claimed to have a gun and threatened to shoot the door lock if my dad didn't open the door. My dad asked me to call Joe, a friend and police officer who lived nearby. I called Joe, and he promised to come right away. My anxiety reached its peak when I heard a silent shot, apparently from a pistol. I peeked through the crack in the door and saw a bullet hole in the door, just inches from my dad's head. We all listened as Joe shouted from outside, telling them to put down their weapons. My dad went out to help, and Joe eventually took down the two men, arresting them without further violence. I cannot describe the extreme fear I experienced. It was a terrible night, but at the same time, it was a wonderful feeling to know that we were out of danger. It was a scary experience, but at the same time, an important lesson in being careful when dealing in person and never ignoring the slightest feeling of insecurity. When night falls and darkness covers every corner, memories of scary encounters still haunt your mind. You may have escaped dangerous situations, but can you really escape the spirits that lurk in your decisions? Strange noises, unrecognizable eyes, and the feeling of being watched will never leave you. In this world where truth and illusion blend, remember that some things never die. They're just waiting for a moment of weakness to return, and then you'll realize that the nightmare never really ended.